Hello, Dion. How you doing?
I'm great. How are y'all?
Good. See, we got some energy in the house. I like it.
Absolutely. I woke up this morning. I could change a lot of stuff from there.
There you go. Well, while we're waiting, and type in the chat where everybody's from. So I know we're probably mainly from Atlanta and Nashville, but let's see. We have some Florida folks too. What's up, Andy? Nashville. Oh, Nash Vegas.
That's what the locals call it.
Yeah.
Every Thursday through Sunday,
Yeah, I've been there.
you get it.
Although it's nice for a out of towner to visit once in a while and have a good time. Central Florida, Denver. What's up, Mike? Puerto Rico. Okay. Love it. You wish you were still there, right?
God, today, yes. You want to get started?
Let's go. It's 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Good deal. So introduction. So thanks everybody for hopping
Sounds
on.
like it'd be really sweet and really awesome. So I'm hoping like once Ashley's gone.
We got a talker.
All right.
All right.
Everybody, if you could mute. Well, I think Benton will be the mute
Yeah.
doctor, right?
Yeah.
But thank you everybody for hopping on. Appreciate it. I'm Michael Anthony out of the Atlanta office for Mutual of Omaha and Keller Home Loans as well. And we've got Brendan out of Nashville, and just a little history about us. So I've been in the business 28 years. Brendan, you've been in it a little longer, I think, right?
29 and 10 months. I'm counting for my 30th anniversary here.
There you go. You're getting close. Okay.
Yeah.
And we've been working together, since 09,
Yeah.
I believe.
Long
right?
time.
So Brendan and I, so Brendan runs the Nashville office. I run the Atlanta office, and we've just always, we do a sales call every Friday, sharpen the blades, and so we just had a lot of good fun. And as far as training goes, we do a lot of training for lenders and realtors, and we're happy to have everybody on today. So hopefully we can just shed some light on what's going on with the the NAR. It's not really, I think it's important to know that we all know what's going on with the NAR and the settlement. So our position is not to really comment on that so much, but we want to take a different angle and say, from a lending perspective, what can we do as your lender and as your partner to sort of help navigate through it and try to really take advantage of what we think will be some opportunity as well in the future. So I think just for the record, the settlement is what it is. It's not finalized. There's a whole bunch of, controversy on that. But at the end of the day, we're here just to sort of help navigate the lending piece of it, right? And also lend support to you guys. I mean, our realtors, we're a team, and, we work together. So look forward to having a collaborative conversation. Anything to add to that, Brendan?
I think it's a disruption for everyone. And so we're going to start our slide deck and go through the lending component part. I think in general, everybody has a different mindset around this, but I was out to dinner last night with a close friend. He had flown in. He's a money manager from Washington, D.C., and that's where I'm originally from. And he said, "Hey, I heard about this realtor thing," and he works for UBS. And he was at Merrill Lynch for 10 years. He's been at UBS for 15. And he's 51 years old. And he was like, "So, I mean, are they not getting paid?" And I was like, "No, they're not getting paid. They're getting paid. It's just this BS kind of thing where ultimately it's going to be more, this is what I said to him. Realtors are going to have to become more transparent. And think of it like a commercial situation we'll just have to understand up front how qualified our buyers are. And we're going to get into that. And he goes, oh, so this is a bunch of BS. And I said, well, it's a disruption for now, but we'll get through it. And he was like, okay. And we started talking about his family. So, you know, it's just funny how the general public, if they know anything about it, what they perceive. Show of hands, did you guys see, and this is not a political statement, but I saw the rerun of what Biden said yesterday. Did you guys see that?
No.
No.
Yeah, it was like the president was taking credit, and now realtors are just encouraged to lower their commissions to make.
No.
Yeah, it was like pull your hair out. And again, I'm not this zero politics. If anything, I'm like in the middle. But when I saw that, like I got mad. I was like, what? Like we gotta. We're gonna work through this. But for the president to immediately announce that realtors should be lowering their commissions in order for more homeowner. I was like, what a load of garbage. So, Benton, would you roll tape and get the slide deck started so we can start presenting? And then we're gonna go for probably 30 minutes. If anybody has a question or wants to kind of, this is gonna be collaborative, but we would like to stay on track.
Yep,
Okay, can everybody see?
we can.
Okay, good deal.
And Ben, you can monitor the chat, correct?
No, I can't.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
we'll be looking at it.
We'll be looking at it.
I
all
can
right,
admit
next.
people.
So how to be proactive.
There you go. You know, and so this is interesting, right? So since this has come out, I've talked to a bunch of real estate agents, and I know you have too, Brendan. And these are things that we're hearing, right? We have realtors that feel the anxiety, right? Anxious, fear of the unknown, because that's just a natural state, right? We do have realtors asking a ton of questions, like, because they want to learn more. Opportunity to gain market share. Interesting. I talked to a real estate agent I do a lot of work with about 2 weeks ago, and he is viewing it as an opportunity because he runs a really good tight business, and he's excited for some of the very weak part-timers to be flushed out of the system, and he's going to gain market share. So we've heard that a little bit. And then chaos is a ladder. Brendan, you comment on that?
One of my realtor friends said, you know, chaos is a ladder, meaning a chance to rise above. And so if this is, quote, chaos for the industry, this is a chance, kind of like bullet point number 4. It's an opportunity to gain market share.
Correct.
So just said differently.
Yeah.
Got it. For sure. Okay. And you know, there may be other feelings out there, but that's the bulk of what we're hearing, obviously. And I think it's important to give you some context of our industry and the lending side. We've had I'd say 3 major sweeping legislation over the last, I'd say 28 years that we've been in the business that has really disrupted our market. And the one that I can think of that is closest to this was in 2011, after the Dodd-Frank bill passed, there was sweeping legislation on our compensation, right? I mean, major changes about how we were going to get paid in our business. And it's really not a lot different than what real estate agents are going through right now. And Brendan, you remember, right? There was so much drama and hoopla about, oh my gosh, we're not going to exist. We're not going to be able to make a living, and a lot of noise, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you know, what's important to take away from this is that we got through it, right? We just had to really figure out how we were going to run our businesses in the future, right? But what we found was the lenders that wanted to do 1 deal a month and clobber the loan, you know, the homeowner and make a ton of money and do no work, that model ceased to exist. It was over. It was gone, which it should have been, you know, and we adjusted and realized that it's a volume play. For us to do well in our business, we have to do more loans at a reasonable price. And also we had to show what our value is. What is our value proposition to our buyers? So I guess our point here is we've gone through a very similar change in our business. Anything to add to that, Brendan?
No, just change is good. It's like Jocko, good.
Yeah. It can be, that's right.
Yeah.
All right, Beth.
Next
you go on
slide.
the next one.
So I think the biggest thing that we want to talk about is, in terms of getting started on the lending component is, and just in the chat, everybody understand what IPC is. If you don't, interested party contributions, and they're like, it's pretty simple. They're costs that are normally the responsibility of the property purchaser that are paid directly or indirectly by someone else who has financial interest or can influence the terms of
No.
the sale. Yeah. So when we look at what this is probably the biggest thing that we're going to show you what the IPC max is on loans. And I think most of you on this call have maybe seen a little spreadsheet or a grid. If not, it's going to be a slide that we have. But ultimately, and this is where it all comes down to, if in the end, the seller can offer the buyer commission, and in the negotiation, this potentially becomes standard and customary, which it has been for forever, the question would be, does this infringe into the IPC total? Go to the next slide where we have the percentage breakdown. So yeah, owner occupied, and we'll send any of you this slide deck so you can have it, where this just says, hey, if it's owner occupied and it's conventional FHA or USDA, which is probably the bulk of what everybody on this call does, these are the percentages of seller contribution towards buyers' closing costs and prepaids, points, buy down fees, whatever.
Right.
So 3% is the limit when it's under a 10% down. When it's 10% down or more, it's 6%. And when it's 25% down or more, it's 9%. Conventional loans. FHA, it's 6% across the board. Does anyone have a question about this or what this means? Because I think every realtor that we've ever worked with, there's always that deal where it's like, how much are we allowed to ask the sellers to contribute before we go over the limit? Any questions? Anybody, you can go off mute if you do have a question on this. No?
And we can send this out too. We have a
Yeah.
nice cheat sheet, yeah.
Next, and then obviously, if you look up their investor deals, the seller can pay 2% towards investor deals. Did we leave out second homes? Maybe we did.
Yeah, maybe.
Second homes, I think it's slightly different, but we can add that when we send that out. Go to the next slide. Question? Oh,
I think that
How
might
are
have
they
been
differentiating second homes from investor properties?
it's a great question. We can look it up while you asked. Somebody looked that up on second home seller contributions on conventional. Because second home doesn't exist for FHA, VA, or USDA, Autumn. So it would only be on conventional. And we can look it up right now.
And Autumn, was the question, what are the max contributions? Or was the question, how do you differentiate between investment and second home?
That's a problem.
I'm sorry?
Burn that down.
Hold on.
But
Sorry, I muted them.
Okay.
Yeah, Autumn, go ahead again.
Or you can type it in the chat.
She went on mute.
Okay.
Set.
Yeah, Michael, I think the question was more so, how does the underwriter determine whether they're buying as an investment property or a second home?
Got it.
It's proximity. Proximity is one rule where what is it, 50 miles or 100 miles?
Yeah, it's somewhere, it's usually about 70, somewhere between there, 75
Here-
miles. And I
Here's
think
what
it's
I tell
also,
everybody. There's a proximity, but here would be an example. In Tennessee, if someone wanted to buy a lake home 30 miles away, or they wanted to buy something up at Mont Eagle, 60 miles away, would that
Right.
classify? And I think the answer is yes. So,
and I
it
think
does-
also too, it depends on the intent of
yes.
the buyer. So if the intention is to occupy it at least a couple weeks out of the year, and let's say you're doing some short-term rentals, but you're going to occupy it for part of the year, then that can typically be considered a second home, right?
Okay,
If you're buying it and there's going to be a long-term lease where you're going to rent it out for like a 12-month lease, then
Mhm.
that is always considered an investment property. Okay. So, we can certainly help distinguish which is which, but typically second home has to be occupied by the buyer for a certain portion of the year.
All right.
Hopefully that helps.
it did, thank you.
Okay, cool. And this was, obviously our hope is that the real estate commissions would not be any part of seller concessions, right? And this is a letter that the Mortgage Bankers Association, in conjunction with the NAR, they sent a letter to the FHFA, FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac, right? So the agencies and the GSE. So the letter basically said, we could send you a copy of the letter, but the letter really explained that their position was that, paying real estate commissions is customary, and they're asking that the real estate commissions not be part of that interested party contribution, right? Which is how it is now. Okay. So just understand that, our industries are in play and they are actively communicating the positions that are really important, particularly for the buyers that are limited on cash, right? So, again, that letter was sent on March 27th. And a well-written, simple letter. But again, the point is that our industry is actively involved along with NAR to try to make sure that interested party contributions are not taking commissions into play. Simple.
And I think, Michael, to add one thing, I told you guys the story. Go ahead and mute it, Ben. The story about my friend who works at UBS, he's from DC and he heard about it.
Mhm.
The critical thing is, can you mute it, Benton?
We're trying.
If you're not asking a question, go on.
Yeah, I just muted everybody. Brendan, unmute yourself.
Unmute. There, you muted me. Thank you. The Congress people are hearing about this, and you saw those letters. The people that will be affected the most, if it is considered part of IPC, would be FHA buyers and VA buyers, because they already have limited funds, and then it would come out of their pocket potentially. So this is a whole firestorm is brewing outside of NAR just with VA and FHA on this, because if all of a sudden our own government programs are no longer usable by the folks that need them, we're going to see IPC changes or IPC increase so that it could accommodate. That's my opinion. But I think it's, if you want to get active politically, you certainly could approach any, your local congressperson about this, especially for FHA and VA. Because when you start to mess with veterans, like every congressperson's like, wait, what? They're not going to be able to buy homes. So just,
Good point.
know that the lending side is as anxious to get this solidified as you guys are. Next slide says agent value proposition. Michael, were you, we've been talking about this a lot. So you take this.
Yeah, I think, and I'm just curious, just type in the chat if, how many people have a written buyer's presentation? Just yes, no. I'm just curious, like how many people have that, because I think that going forward, if you have to have a buyer's brokerage signed before you show a property, it's super important to be able to communicate what your value proposition is. Why should somebody work for you or with you, right? And I think we put a couple things up here, like how can you create a concierge level service that can pay you on the low end 2% and maybe 4%, right? One of the agents I talked to a couple of weeks ago was like, I think it's an opportunity in some cases for us to make more than 3% in some cases, right? And he had a pretty good approach. But I think also too, it's educate, don't defend, right? I mean, I think a lot of people in our industry felt attacked when this when this passed, and it's easy to be cynical and negative, but at the end of the day, we just have to take time to educate the consumers on how you solve problems, how you save them money, shield them from stress, and how we change lives. So it's important to start thinking about how, when you meet a new buyer, how do you present your value proposition? It's not going to be the old, well, don't worry, you don't pay me, the seller pays me, right? There has to be more to that. And I think there was a stat that came out, 87% of buyers agents do not have a written presentation. 87%. So that's a big number. Okay. And I think going back to when our compensation changed back in 2011, it really forced our people in our industry to come up with a value proposition as well. Why should somebody work with us versus an online lender or a discount lender, right? What's the difference? So again, these are just things that we need to start thinking about and working towards.
All right. So I think if some of you guys had checked that you do, we had kind of gone back and looked at a history of Michael and I working with agents and just doing a little research. And here are our clear bullet points, or just, the presenting the timeline, kind of establishing like the frame of how much time they can expect from you. What are these creative bullet points? A lot of people talk about, hey, we find off-market properties. What guarantees do you give them? What's your negotiation strategy? Again, look at all these little links. Does anybody, I want to hear if from the people that have a formal presentation, is there anything in your formal presentation that you can add to the chat, or we can unmute? I feel like if nobody's having side conversations, Benton, go ahead and unmute. And then does anybody have other things that they add to their presentation that would be a general bullet point that we could add to this?
We work with the best agents because a lot of them do already have presentations that they create. So that they're already ahead of the curve. So that's awesome.
Benton, did you unmute? There we go. Anybody want to chime in on something that they see in here that is something specifically they've added to their presentation?
Yes. Yeah, what I've added, thank you for letting me speak. What I add is that I keep them up to date on price reductions as well as properties back on the market.
Okay. Got it. So
And-
just an inventory update and a price update real time.
Yeah, and also state to them that I'll keep you updated with on Monday, well, actually each day, when the new listings come out. Also active coming soon. I also include that as well.
Right.
Nice.
One thing that I have in mind that I don't see on this list is the lifeline of my service to them and how it continues post closing and what they can expect to receive from me on an ongoing basis. That's an annual real estate review, quarterly check-ins with market updates, and my newsletter if they'd like to stay in tune with real estate trends and news and updates. That's in there. I think that should be in anybody,
Yeah.
either side.
Yeah, it's funny, Autumn. That's such a great point. I had gone, I think I told you this. I went to that John Cheplack Maverick event, which is it's a realtor event. And there were these ladies, they're called the Girls with Grit. Have you ever heard of them?
I did from you, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so they had this one thing, the lifetime value of a client to a realtor. And I swear it was like $480,000. Here's their little, here was their handout, Girls with Grit, and their lifetime value of a client. I mean, this is crazy. Was $492,000 to an agent. I don't know how it was like, it was factored in number of moves and commissions and then referrals and introductions to other people. And they did like the average home price. And it was really neat how they walked through it, but it's just basic stuff. So Autumn, perfect. We need to add that lifetime value. So what do agents, so
Yeah, Ben, share this. This is pretty interesting. So one of our real estate agents in Florida sent us this list, and I think they spent, some of you may have seen this, but they spent some time like literally writing down all of the things that they do for buyers, right, over the course of a transaction, or obviously many transactions. You're not going to do all 90 things for each person, but it was really interesting because, you know, a lot of buyers that are not educated in the market, there's so many things on this list that they would never even think about. It doesn't even hit the radar. So we can send this out as well, but it's really interesting that, I mean, we know what you do, you know what you do. And I think it's a matter of trying to relay this to buyers in a way that they can appreciate, doesn't confuse them, right? We're not saying that all 90 of these things have to be in a buyer presentation, right? But, you know, this is just something that makes your mind start thinking.
You know what, creatively, for all of you that want this, we'll get it out. Here's a thought. What if each one of these you could kind of categorize as like, hey, here's what we do in the beginning when we just meet you as a buyer. And then here, when you sign our buyer broker, here's what's happening in the background out of this list. Then when we make our first offer, here's all the other things we do. And then, when we're under contract acceptance, post inspection, we've cleared that. Here's the next round of things we do. And then like Autumn said, once we close, here's all the other stuff we do. It'd be cool for someone to see it in sections versus just a list of 90. Right. And you could incorporate this to a cool visual in your buyer broker thing. Like, did you know?
Yeah.
and then someone's like, holy crap, I had no idea.
Right.
I mean, it's price conditioning, right? Aren't we price conditioning? I mean, that's really what we're doing.
Nice.
And in every industry, you pay for what you get. So, but
True.
yeah, we can send this out for sure.
So teamwork will be more important than ever. I think we use this slide to just say, and I've said this, that when you're in a partnership with a good lender, I've always been a little offended when lenders are called vendors. Now, I'm not offended when realtors call title people, home insurance people, and termite people, they're vendors. But when you call us a vendor and we're the ones meeting with leads up front, and at this event, there was a realtor that knew his numbers tremendously, and he did both referral business and like lead gen through Zillow and all the sites. He said that the lead gen stuff, the cycle was 7 months to really get activity started. And he noticed that when he partnered with his lender, that the communication, because let's be honest, 80 to 90% of your guys' leads that don't know you, that are generated from online, they're going to need a mortgage. And they're going to have a lot of financial questions along with the questions they ask you about areas to live. So now we think that this opportunity for you guys to tighten up your buyer broker presentation really is teamwork with us, so that we're working the client together. Because guess what? What if the seller isn't going to pay? How do we figure out how to get you guys paid? So it's even more important to be like working together as partners versus vendors. So we use this little triangle. the lender, or it could have the agent at the top, but the buyer, buyer at top, agent left, lender right. We are in this triangulation, if you will, to try to get the business and make it tighter. So that's the visual. What's the next slide?
I just want to highlight something that I saw in the chat too before we move on. Dan's sermon, this is a good idea for all the realtors, just in case you didn't see this, but the 90 things on the previous slide, you can take each of those and turn them into video clips for social media. So if you're looking for content, as the marketing guy, I have to say that. But
Hey, that's
yeah,
a great point. Thanks.
next slide.
Michael.
Yeah. So, we're here to support you. And that's the reason, for everybody on the call that has worked with Brendan and me and our teammates, I think that we are obviously here to support you in any time, but especially going through a transition like this, we want to help. So there's a few things that we do, and for people that don't or haven't worked with us, there's a few things that we do to sort of solidify the relationship. So we call it the triangle of trust. So Brendan, you're probably the best, with role play at this, but when a new referral comes to us, the real estate agent refers us a client, the very first thing we do is say, oh, who referred you over? And they'll say, well, Nancy, my real estate agent referred you to us. Our first thing is to edify our real estate agent. Oh my gosh, Nancy is amazing. How do you know Nancy? And then we'll get a story about how they know their real estate agent, right? Now, if they have a long-term relationship with their real estate agent, they know them very well, okay? But sometimes it could be, you know what? I just met Nancy at an open house. I really don't know her very well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really great opportunity for us as your lender partner to say, oh my gosh, you just sort of happened to meet Nancy. Well, let me tell you how I know Nancy. I've known Nancy for 10 years. We've been working together hand in hand on a whole slew of clients, and she is the best in the business. Let me tell you what she does for her clients. It's an opportunity for us to edify you, the realtor, and to make them understand that, especially if it's maybe they don't have a really strong relationship with you, to make them understand that, hey, they made a really good choice in selecting you, the realtor. So I think that's really important thing that we do right off the top. And as we get to know you better, we know what your value is. We know what you do very well. And it's important for us to reinforce that, especially as we go into these sort of uncharted territory of having these buyer brokerages signed, and you're justifying what your fees are. Anything else on the triangle of trust, Brendan, that you can think of?
I just always think that it's simple. If you guys don't have a good resource, write this name down, Renee Rodriguez. Renee Rodriguez. He owns a company called Amplify, and he wrote a book on the art of influence. He works on brain, how does your brain react? Michael and I went to a 2-day event. It was $5,000 a head, and we got a 12-course meal to start the event on a Thursday night, and then we went all Friday and Saturday. And in the meal, it was a private meal, and the chef came out, and every meal had a name, and the chef told a story before we ate the meal. And it was incredible, Michael. I'll never forget that night. But what Renee basically said was, the minute that we work together as a lender and a realtor partnership, how we're framing each other and how we're framing our value, because if Amy and I are working together, and the client met Amy at an open house, and then all of a sudden he met 4 other realtors. Well, guess what? Those realtors are recommending their lenders. And so it's all of a sudden 5 different lender realtor duos are hawking after this person who put their information on an open house spreadsheet, on a Zillow sign-in thing. So you got to think about this in this partnership. If we can reinforce each other very quickly, and the skills that we offer that client to then be able to have better face-to-face meetings, especially your buyer broker meeting and our Smart Start meeting, if those things complement each other, that's when that client goes, why wouldn't I work with Brenda and Michael versus Betty and Bob? Because if the lender is just answering the phone as on a referral basis and oh, I got your name from Cindy over at Remax. Great. Well, how can I help you today? Oh, well, yeah, she said to call about getting a mortgage. Oh, well, you know what you can do? I'm jumping in a meeting. Why don't you just fill out my online form and my processor will get back to you? It's like, great. Anybody can do an intake, but we got to build value. So the specific skills and services that we want to discuss during our meeting, the more we can reinforce each other in this process. Log into Rene Rodriguez, watch him on Instagram and watch what he talks about influence. There's so many powerful things, but nothing beats face-to-face meetings and a very strong entry point of a relationship model and how we work together and how we know each other. That's like, that goes back to the core of like your brain. And do I trust this person or do I not? So, yes. Next slide.
All right. Well, I think that was it. Go back real quick.
Sure.
So I would just say, again, most people know that have worked with us. We're let some people in here. We have a very in-depth, detailed meeting with our clients, which are your referrals. So I think it's really important to know that who you work with matters a lot, and Brendan mentioned it. We have our meeting is called our Smart Start meeting. Some of the realtors on the call have sat in on some of these Smart Start meetings, and they're very impactful. And if you haven't sat in on one of them, I suggest that you go ahead and do it. And you'll get a really good sense of how our meeting goes with clients. And you can see how we do reinforce you as the realtor. And again, it's going to become more important. And as we fast forward 6 months or a year, as maybe commissions get squeezed a little bit, right? Or, somebody doesn't have enough money, we're going to have to work together as a team to make deals work and get deals to the closing table. You absolutely have to have a lender that is nimble, that can, sort of make deals work. Maybe let's figure out how to get this to the finish line, right? All lenders are not created equal. You all know that. And I think we take pride in really trying to be as creative as we can to get our customers to the table. And sometimes that's us not, getting our full compensation, or sometimes we're having to make some concessions to get it to the table. But it's really, really important to work together as a team. And I would say, lastly, let us know, if there's 2 or 3 things that you want us to emphasize for you or on your behalf in our Smart Start meeting. We want to know that. For the realtors that we know really well, we know what to say. We know a few things that we can talk about, but we're happy to help incorporate some of these things on your behalf, because that's what we should be doing. But at this point, we're really done with the main presentation, but I would just say, hey, mindset is super important right now. What you're thinking in your mind and how you're going to approach this is going to have a lot to do with your success.
Mm-hmm.
And viewing what you do as a business and not a job, right?
Yeah.
Your job is not a real estate agent. Your business is real estate, right? And anybody that has a business plan, right? And maybe one component of the business plan is retooling or retweaking your buyer presentation, right?
Yeah.
So I think in closing, we would like to say, hey, look, anything that we can do to help you brainstorm or vet these ideas, we're certainly open to doing that. And who knows, maybe even in the future doing like part 2, maybe we can go in depth on a buyer presentation or something like that. So we'd love to hear back from you. And at this point, are there any other just general questions?
Yeah. What questions or complexities do you guys see happening Who here specifically has a question for us related to lending or a scenario that they think could happen?
I've got a question.
Sure.
And you guys might know it and you might have gone over this, but maybe I missed it. Let's say I've got a client that's approved for 700,000.
Yeah.
We find a house that is 700,000, but they're just not willing to pay a buyer's agent commission. And so maybe our offer comes in at 700,000 plus the seller's paying commission, and they say no, we're not doing that, and we need 700 to go to the next one. So we wrap up our commission of 700 and whatever that would be.
21,000.
Yeah. So
Okay. So a seller's just not willing to pay and you're offering full price, or the
and then
scenarios.
we tack on our commission, but they're pre-approved for 700,000. Are we going to have an issue with the loan in a situation like that?
I think, well, two things. If these numbers are absolute and the client, here's what I'm assuming, that every listing agent, back up for 1 second. Every listing agent moving forward is going to say this to a seller. Hey, Brendan, Christina, I want to sell your house. I normally charge 3%. The law changed. And if I think your house is worth 700,000, we used to put our commission and the buyer's agent commission together and we would sign an agreement. Now you can only pay me what I agreed with you, and we can put this little asterisk in our system that says you're willing to pay a buyer's commission. I think that the standard buyer's commission is going to be between 2 and 4%. If I'm going to represent you as a seller, I think we need to check that we're willing to pay a buyer's commission. Would you agree with that? Are you against that? Now, ready? I'm Brendan and Christina. Well, what happens, hold on, if we don't want to pay that? The listing agent would say, well, we're going to maybe sacrifice a sale, because if someone has a conventional loan and they're coming in with 5% down, $35,000, and they've got 50 grand in their total savings account to pay the additional closing costs, that 21,000 or 15,000 that would be paid to the buyer's agent normally by you, they might not have it to pay their buyer's agent. Are you okay moving forward? I think every listing agent in America knows that that's what's on the table in the listing presentation. Do you guys disagree with me?
No.
Okay, if you don't, so I don't know who asked the question. At that point, ready? Now shift over to the buyer side and what we've been talking about the last 15 minutes. Okay, let's talk about the Smart Start presentation. How deep are we going with how much money they have? Let's say they're first-time home buyers and they can borrow against their 401k. Let's say that there was a gift possibility from a family member. If we look at this and say to them and prep them, hey, we're really close to running out of funds. And if you find a place that your realtor, who asked the question?
I think it was Reed. Cersei.
Reed. If your Reed had referred you over, if his fee that he disclosed to you, pretend Reed that you texted us, hey, they signed a buyer broker paying me 3. Well, his fee of 21,000, if we go up to 700, we have to figure out where that's coming from in the event the seller doesn't want to pay. And that's the Band-Aid that we're all going to have to rip off in these meetings. And if we don't, we're going to be, Reed, to your scenario, hey, you're making an offer, you're not getting paid, you're pissed, like who wants to work for free? And then like, what are we doing? So I think that's all in discovery. I think, does that deal happen? We kind of talked about, Michael, does the 5% down Fannie with 3% IPC, does it go to 4 or 5? Reed, it's a tough question to answer. And the simple answer would be we have to prep a little bit more so that doesn't happen. And I do think that the average first-time home buyer listing, if the listing agent thinks that they can't talk about what the seller needs to pay the buyer, they're absolutely nuts or they're super selfish.
Yeah, I think all of us have come across the sharks that are just terrible people to work with. Like they don't advocate or do anything for their clients. They're really not being a fiduciary. It is going to be very challenging for us to say, hey, we're a fiduciary, and then to know that someone out there is probably Ryan Holmes is not going to pay a commission or something like that.
Well,
but the
here's the
question was
thing.
really advocating on like the loan portion. Will that extra commission affect their DTI? Like
Michael.
when they are stretching and they're at a 700, but we need them, in the perfect world to get to 721 with commissions. Will that rule of, commissions change on your all side?
Think of it this way. Ratios are black and white. So if you're saying, hey, we got to bump the price to 720 to pay me, and then the seller would pay based on the fact that they're receiving more and giving it back, if that all of a sudden takes someone's debt to income ratio out of qualifying, they wouldn't qualify. So we'd have to figure that out. And Fannie Mae hasn't come back and said, oh, if you bump it, as long as it appraises, we have no problem with the DTI going over. Like that hasn't happened yet. So the simple answer is it would affect the DTI. That could affect the outcome, but we'll see how that plays out. Michael?
No, yeah, I would just make a comment that if we see this happen, or there's a high probability of that, in our meeting, we're just going to lower that max purchase price to build in your 3%.
Sure. Yeah.
Just to be safe. I mean, why not? Right. Because if that occurred, right, and we had to build it in, we just want to make sure they're still going to qualify for what we told them. So that could be, a way to play that, which an online lender, when you're pressing a button, getting an approval, do you think they're going to look at that and care? No. Yeah.
Somebody was asking a question.
I think to me, it's going to be just the same as any of us finding a property off market. Every so often, I was going to say a couple times a year, we'll find something off market. And someone's like, hey, we want 500,000. We're not willing to pay commission. So the easiest way to navigate that is to really be like, all right, this 500,000 includes commission. So think of it like a, 480 or 90, whatever it is.
480.
Yeah.
And so just think of it like that. And I always have to explain that to people. And then they're like, oh, okay, we get it. You're offering a little bit lower.
Right.
This is where
it'll be the ship. Go ahead.
Me?
Somebody had a question?
It was me. No, I think that this is where our forms are going to come into handy, where we're using our right to show forms inside of our toolkit to get those in writing, before we show that property, so that even that potential seller knows what that looks like too.
Yeah. This goes back to someone, I have a friend in the commercial real estate business. It's just disclosure up front is going to be a little tighter, and communication up front on the lending side has to be tighter. And I think it's like, so as long as does your lender use some type of tool that shows client ratios and is showing you very much where the limit is, so that in that last little 10,000, 15,000 to get you paid fully, does that move the needle and change things? So I think that was a great little question. What other questions do we have in the limited time? We were trying to go from 9 to 9:45, so this wasn't a forever thing.
Going once.
Feed on.
Andy went on mute.
Andy, I dropped something in the chat in response to. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. In response to Reed's scenario, if that $21,000 difference is a deal breaker, because the client does not have an extra $21,000, but maybe they have an extra $5,000 to $10,000 that they can budget toward it. My initial thought was, okay, well, if DTI is an issue and they're getting 6.5%, and the DTI is too high, what if we can budget them to put an extra $5,000 to $6,000 toward a buy down, get the DTI back down, and then you can still get that 21,000. Or Reed, you say your contract says you're going to get paid 3%, which is 21,000. What if maybe you take some of yours, put it toward a buy down? Maybe the lender puts a little bit of lender credit toward a buy down to get it down if the client truly doesn't have an extra dollar to put toward it. And instead of 21,000, you make 15 or 16,000, but we bought down the rate enough to make up the difference on the DTI because we were able to lower the payment. So that was just one thing that came to mind. I mean, there's going to be other solutions to this. This is just one thing I thought of. And it takes a little bit maneuvering, and you look at a situation where it's their perfect home, it's the perfect home for them. It's a competitive market. You want to get it under contract. You look at making 15,000 versus 21,000. If you just divert some of the commissions, and us on the lender side, we want to help with that too, because we want the deal too, because that's how we get paid. So that's just one thing that I thought of.
Yeah, and there's gonna be a lot of creative scenarios, I think.
Go team. Go team.
Good thinking, Andy.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're a lender who plays Spanish flamenco guitar, you could whip out the guitar at the very end and add that, as a complete buying experience.
That's right.
Inside joke for a lender on this call. I don't play the guitar, but I play harmonica. So I think it's going to be a team effort. We're going to learn. Michael and I talked about, as we learn more, maybe we do round 2 in about 45 days, a month and a half. Is there anything else? I love it when we're challenged and you in your industry have to improve something. And it goes back to that. Is this a ladder to something better for you? Is this the opportunity? So I think the more any agent on this call who doesn't have a crystallized buyer presentation, we'd love to work with you, kind of show you ours. And, should you have an intake questionnaire for a lead that barely knows you? I think you should. Should you have an 8 to 10 page, almost like a Cutco knife presentation? If anybody's ever bought Cutco knives, they present and they teach people how to present. If you work on it and you've done it a couple hundred times, you can tweak it. And I think ultimately that bottom line says, when you hire me as an agent and you're going to pay me X, you're going to get every ounce of everything in this presentation and then some, so that you're going to be happy. And if we know that on the lending side as a partner and know what you're presenting and what we're presenting, that's when that little triangle, there it is. That's the triangle, Michael. Did you see that? Triangle works. And, we're closing more business. We're beating the other realtor lender duos every time because we just together are that much more in sync and powerful. So that's all. Read Raving Fans.
Raving Fans, great book. Take you about 3 hours to read it, but it's really good. So everybody, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for participating. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Okay. I'm gonna try to do this. This isn't good, Joe. No, it isn't. Not at all.